Hi, it's Maria, and I'm doing another Maria Unfiltered, and this is part of the Forgiveness to Love series. And this one, get ready for this one because I am going to share so many details with you. Your head might be spinning afterwards. I hope mine isn't, but but yeah, it's time that we hear about the details that have been so well hidden for much too long. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you can increase your consciousness in areas of law that before had simply been beyond your grasp. And so much of the status quo, has allowed certain behaviors to be enshrouded in veils of darkness and veils of confusion, right? And so, even with my own inheritance issues, I had been so manipulated by a barrage of outside forces that were so heavy that I simply couldn't even find one single attorney in the entire state of Florida to help me. And I'll repeat that because it almost sounds unbelievable. But truly, there was not one attorney in Florida who would or could represent me. And I'm even getting choked up about that because, yeah, that's what I was told by an attorney. And he said, as much as I might want to represent you, I can't. And I thought, wait a minute, without legal representation, I had lost before I stepped into any legal negotiation or dispute. And so I I thought about it and I thought, oh, this is really an analogy is to walk into, well, not to walk into, but to be gurneyed into an OR, an operating room for open heart surgery. And then you walk in, but all the lights are off and the surgeon and the nurses have all gone home. And I thought, oh, what am I doing here in these courtrooms? And so I felt bulldozed. I felt intimidated, manipulated, and totally hung out to dry. I mean, how would you feel if you desperately needed an attorney because things were just getting stolen from you left, right, and center, and you interviewed 12 different law firms and no one would even come near your case? And it wasn't that they felt that there was anything wrong with the case. I just don't know, but they could not. They said they could not. And so, and I felt like they were actually like waiting for me to self-destruct to finish me off because this may seem very personal, because it is to me and because of the size of my parents' fortune. But you know what? Things like this have been going on for years. They've been going on for decades, maybe centuries. And whether it's for a few dollars, a few $1,000s, or a few $1,000,000, the legal disputes are merely a reflection. And here I go into the whole spiritual aspect of it, but that's what this is all about because there is nothing that does not have a spiritual component to it. And so legal disputes are merely a reflection of the collective consciousness, okay? Which is merely a reflection of the global consciousness, And so, and this I was to see, and not only see, but experience firsthand. Like I was just so shocked by it all. And yet I really wasn't because I knew things like this went on even during my law school days, but it's not something that you experience on this side of the courtroom. And so I know that many have been affected and few have understood. And so I felt like this was my gift from the divine. And this is my gift to you because we can really see our world in a whole different perspective than had we not understood that this is how This is how it rolls. This is how life is on planet Earth. And I'm not pointing the finger at anyone. I'm not asking for explanations, because I think it's beyond all that. This is how things roll on planet Earth in so many different venues, whether it is the legal system, whether it's the medical society, whether it's big business, whether it's any corporate structure or any situation where powerful people get together and make up some rules. There are going to be certain parameters within which everyone else must play. And so that's just the way it is when you have groups of people that have a lot of money and have a lot of power and have a lot of control, right? And so anyway, what I wanted to say though is that spiritually speaking, when you talk about your relationship with your significant other, and you think, oh, this just goes on in my home, and yet you know what? It's so much bigger than that, because that relationship is really a reflection of what's going on in your home. So the energy of the relationship is really a reflection of what goes on in your home. What goes on in your home is merely a reflection of what goes on your block. What goes on your block is merely a reflection of what goes on perhaps in your place of employment. What goes on in your place of employment is merely a reflection of what goes on in your town, in your state, in your country. So you see, these are small problems that we see on a microscopic level, and yet they are truly representative of what goes on a macroscopic level. And so, it's almost like we talk about the symptoms, that we have when we have an illness. Well, the symptoms are just a manifestation. And so what we see going on in the world is really a manifestation of a much deeper situation, of a much heavier energetic issue that we are all being faced with. And so also, I just wanted to note that the estate attorney in my parents' estate and in that litigation was a friend and a neighbor of my sibling, and that estate attorney also doubled as a real estate attorney that gave my son my home. So you see, when people can play dual roles, for instance, things can get mushed into like a toxic stew of darkness. And then there's a lack of boundaries. And that is also a manifestation of a much deeper problem, which is the lack of boundaries is part of the minds of the unconscious collective. And that's been going on since time immemorial. And so that's exactly what happens when legal battles everywhere. And my parents' estate was just one of many, 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 many. And so now, though, given the changes in the energy of our planet, many of these machinations that have been going on behind the scenes are finally being revealed. And so I'm hoping that you learn much from the videos that I'm putting out, because I am telling you from my personal experience, firsthand, what I saw and what I heard and what I was told, and then the aftermath of it all, I think, speaks for itself. But finally, I was waiting for someone to actually find the word integrity in the dictionary, along with the word honesty and carrying out the letters of the law, right? And so anyway, my goal is for you to have a clear understanding, like never before, of what to look out for in your own daily situations and circumstances, because this isn't isolated to just an estate issue, and it's not even isolated to the legal system. I mean, this is life on planet Earth, and we are dealing with a lot of energies that are holding on with dear life to control. And so Anyway, through this, though, I'm hoping you can put yourself in my place and get kind of a firsthand experience rather than it being some theoretical issue. And so I'll try to be as concise as possible, as it might relate to me, so that it's easier to understand. So I'm going to give you some crucial details, and they're very simple, really. My parents had two condos on Clearwater Beach in Florida. And so my father and mother lived in 414. And it was a corner, it was a spacious corner unit with an unobstructed view of the Gulf of Mexico. So it was a beautiful condo. And then I lived in 417, which was just down the hall from 414. And it was a condo, it was actually facing Gulf Boulevard. And because I actually preferred to hear the nightly activity, of people walking around and stuff rather than the blackness of the ocean. But that unit just happened to be on the market when I had come from Chicago and I had decided to relocate to Florida. And so my dad was thrilled because he said, "Oh, this is very clear cut now. I have two daughters and two condos." And mine was a little cheaper than his corner unit because, as I said, it faced Gulf Boulevard. And so he said he made up for that with I had the benefit of living in it while he and my mom were living in their other unit. And my sibling didn't really need a condo because she had a big, beautiful home in Bel Air, which was the neighboring town. And so, anyway, the ownership of the two condos was made known in the trust and the will. And after my parents' death in 2011, my father died in 2010, my mother in 2011, I went on a vacation to Brazil. I went to a spiritual mission to pray as I needed to heal from the tragic murders of my parents. And so, unbeknownst to me, my son hired an attorney, one that was actually working with his father, the ex. And so, as I've said in my other videos, this is number 5, but I've said in my other videos that there were really 3 people who were responsible for most of my losses. And they were my ex, who has since passed, I believe in 2015 or 2016, my sibling, my only sibling, who was a co-executor with me at one time, and who was the other 50% beneficiary of my parents' estate. And then my oldest son. He is one of 4 children, but he was the oldest, and he was the one that I actually had sole custody of because he had no relationship at all with his father. And so, anyway, this son was working with his father. So apparently they did mend their relationship. And it was through the sibling's estate attorney that was also her real estate attorney that she gave my condo to my child. And I must stop here because it sounds so criminal already, that it's almost beyond ridiculous, because I have 4 children. And in my parents' trust, my father was concerned that the ex was going to try to steal some of his estate, some of his money, as he had so often threatened to do. And so my father stipulated in the trust that each one of my children would ultimately inherit 25% of my inheritance. And that makes only sense, right? But only after their 25th birthday. And that's the only reason he did that, is because he said that if, in fact, I died before they had all reached 25, then my ex might be able to go to court and say, you know what, I am in control of these children, and so I should be in charge of all of their money. And so my father didn't want my children to get anything until they were at least 25, if, God forbid, anything should happen to me. So that was in the trust. And once they became of age, they're all of age now and have been for a while. So that's really kind of a moot point. But that was how concerned my father was, to protect his estate from an ex-son-in-law who at one time he was very supportive of. And yet, as time passed, I think he saw the true colors of his ex-son-in-law and then wanted nothing to do with him. But my sibling gave my son my home, Unit 417, right, that we talked about, that was just down the hall from my parents. And my son was actually the least favorite of all the grandchildren. Maybe it was because he was the oldest and he got the most attention, but he rarely spoke to his grandparents unless he wanted something. And he had some addictions and he didn't attend their funeral. And plus, he moved to the UK. So, what business did this child have in claiming my Florida home and everything in it? And leaving me starving and on the street? Well, he had no business at all. In any event, I learned when he was a witness against me in my own bankruptcy trial, if you can believe that, that he had been clearly conspiring with his father to steal my assets. And so that I knew, yet without an attorney to represent me, I was powerless to even defend myself. And I did defend myself in a couple trials, and just did a horrific job, I think, because I'm not trained in litigation. And so anyway, I think it was just kind of a comedy for the other side. They thought it was very funny. I really don't think it's funny when you try to destroy someone's life, but through financial strangulation. And I've spoken about this in, I think it was the first video, that I kind of dissected the way that they went about trying to ruin me. One was financial strangulation by taking all my resources. And then the second one was a physical strangulation where, I was poisoned and my physical safety was in question, and I feared for my safety. And the third was emotional strangulation, and that was just to kind of poison everybody around me so that I had no support. But anyway, I did feel powerless to say anything to anyone without an attorney, and knowing that I was really on the hot seat for so many years of my life. It's just, I can't even believe it. I mean, I just thank God that I've gotten through so many things, as many of you have. I mean, when you sit back and you think of, wow, this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened, and I'm still here. And you know what? I've learned so much. And I know sometimes when we're going through it, it's not like we go, oh, yay, we did it. But you know what? At the same time, you can sit back and you can say, I truly am a much stronger person, a much wiser person, a much more aware person, hopefully a much more awakened person as well, and a much more grounded person. And along with that is humility and generosity and kindness and benevolence and responsibility. And there are so many wonderful qualities that we embody when we have kind of gone through the fire, if you will. And so I apologize. I didn't mean to digress, because I really want to get into the facts of this. But at the same time, I don't want to make it so just so factual that we've lost the humanity in it, and we've lost the personality of all of those involved as well. I mean, here was my ex who on our wedding night told me basically he was gay and he married me for my money. And so now he's a character, right? And then you have a sibling who's never liked me and has always wanted a lot of attention from me. But I didn't really know that. We were just, we just weren't of the same personality. We didn't really get along. And so we had different friends and different ideas and different goals and different pursuits. And then you have the son, and he was my oldest, and to me at the time, he was my favorite because he was the only one that was living with me. And so I had 3 sons, and then I had my beautiful princess daughter. And so, but my oldest son was living with me 24/7, and I was his only support. And so, yeah, we were very aligned. And so you've got these three personalities. Well, what happened is they all joined together and decided they were going to, like, rape and pillage everything they could of mine. And so it's almost like a horror show, or slash, you know, comedy, I guess, or I don't know. But anyway, that is what happened. And then you have, like, the supporting actors in all of this, which is the attorneys. And I think I mentioned in one of them, I think we had at one time 30 attorneys and 50 experts, and it lasted 4 years or 5 years, and there were 400 court dates, and millions of dollars just kind of being shredded. And it was just ridiculous. They talked about the War of the Roses. Well, this was the War of the Georges, and it just didn't have to be. But then again, if it wasn't to be, then I wouldn't be here telling you about this saga, and how even you, no matter what you've gone through, you can actually turn it around and see the gifts in all of it. And I don't say that flippantly, and I'm not making light of my situation, because it is ridiculous. It's wrong. There's nothing right about it. There's so much criminality and injustice involved. At the same time, here we are, human beings, gravitationally tethered to this little planet in the Milky Way galaxy, in the universe of the megaverse and the multiverse, and you have to sit back and see things from a higher perspective and just say, wow, now what was that all about, really? And so, anyway, as my son, like everyone else, had a choice as to whether he was going to move forward in integrity, and find the love within himself that's available to each and every one of us, or if he were going to wallow in the dark. And so, still now, 17, how many years later? Yeah, 17 years later, actually, it's been, because well, my other children stopped talking to me in 2005 after I moved to Florida. I flew them down a few times. My father had said, I'll fly them down anytime they want to come if you move down to Florida. And so he flew them down a few times. And then, I wrote the letter, the letter that was the subject of a huge defamation trial. And I haven't been keeping up with Johnny Depp and his defamation trial, because, frankly, I have absolutely no interest in it. Maybe it's because I had my own kind of scene like that, which was so nauseating, but because I just see everything to be like just a big show, and it really is. It funds the attorneys, it funds the hotels, it funds the media, it funds the restaurants, it funds all of the employees. It just funds it funds the film crews. I mean, that's kind of how I analyze everything in terms of who benefits from whatever happens in our world. But anyway, so years before, in family court, my oldest son actually asked for an in-camera interview with the judge, the divorce judge, right? And she was going to determine custody. And there was never an issue with custody, because I thought we should have joint custody. And yet, and when I said, go ahead, take the money, take the house, take everything, all I want are the children, he said, oh, well, now I know how I'm going to get you. I'm going to take the children. So he launched this huge custody fight that was just absolutely ridiculous. And all it did was really, it punished the children. And the children were the losers there. They suffered. I mean, we all lost, of course, but the children were the ones that saw the acrimony, and they saw the strategy, and just the malevolence and the malice and everything in so many of the decisions that were being made, and in the mindsets of many of the players. And so, my youngest three children were not allowed to testify because they were 16 and younger. And my oldest Peter, was allowed to testify. And so he told the judge that, in fact, he had to live with me. He said that I had to have sole custody of him because he was terrified of his father, and he had heard his father threaten to kill me. And he was afraid not only for me, but for himself. And and he wanted nothing to do with his father. So the judge complied and gave me sole custody. And he was thrilled because he said, now I get to be the only child that I've always wanted to be, and I get all of your attention. And so that was a little weird, but, life appeared very good for him. And we were very close. And so you can imagine my shock when all of a sudden, during this bankruptcy trial, he was the star witness, and he was living in the UK, but he flew in, I guess, to Chicago, and was in with his father's attorneys. And so it was a Zoom call, or it was before Zoom, because this was 2009, but I think it was 2009. Anyway, it was before Zoom, so it was some other platform where there was a video. It was a video call. And so during that, the judge had said, I will erase the judgment, the $10 million defamation judgment, if she can prove that she was actually afraid of her ex-husband. And truly, that was why I wrote the letter, because I was terrified and had gone to various law enforcement and agencies, and they said, you know what, write down what you know, because otherwise, if anything happens to you, so's your story. And so they said, write it down, and then send it to as many people as you know, or they said, say it to, whatever. Anyway, I ended up writing a letter, showed it to my attorneys, and I said, so what do you think? And they said, yeah, go ahead. And so I wrote this letter and I sent it out. And then my ex-husband said he wasn't invited to some Christmas parties or something, and he felt that he was harassed. So anyway, he got an order of protection against me, and he said I wasn't allowed to talk to my children or something because I was a bad influence, and I was disparaging him or something like that. I merely wrote the truth in the letter, and certainly never even showed it to my children. Now, how they got copies of it perhaps was through other people, but I really didn't want my children to know the abuse that I had sustained for really every year of my marriage, all the 16 years. And then I had an abusive marriage, but then I had an even more abusive divorce, right? Because this is what's going on. So anyway, I'm losing my train of thought because there's so much. I want to make sure that I share with you all the key points. And so actually, my son gave this, interview to this testimony to the judge in the divorce court. And as I said, she gave me sole custody of him. So during the bankruptcy trial, the judge said, well, if in fact Maria was truly afraid of her ex-husband, then in fact I will erase the judgment. Well, my son was a star witness, and so we had a copy of the court transcript that where he had testified before the judge, and he was saying exactly some of the things that he had heard. And he said, I'm afraid I can't live with him because not only am I afraid for my mother, but I'm afraid for myself. Well, as the star witness, he then said that he never said anything like that. And so my attorney was actually reading the transcript, and he said, you know what, and on this date and on this time, you told the judge this is quote. And he said, no, I don't remember saying that. And so anyway, I was really shocked. You can imagine how shocked I was. But let's see. And I had, fortunately, a copy of that transcript because in my home office, the second bedroom of my condo was like an office, and I had lateral file cabinets all over the sides and the perimeter of the room. And I happened to have a copy of that transcript, so I had all the evidence. But um, along with thousands of pages of my own writing where I was documenting all these, 20 years of litigation up to that point. But it was my sibling who actually gave my son, my 30-year-old son at the time, my home, and literally cleaned me out and put me out on the street. And so when I called my son and I said, if it means that much to you that you have to have control of my home, and you want possession, you want ownership of my home, I will give it to you. In the meantime, I need a place to live because that's my only residence, and I've lived there 10 years, and most everything I have is there. And so I'd like to live there. And so he refused, and he told me to call his attorney and not to ever call him again. And his attorney was actually my ex's attorney, so they were sharing an attorney. So anyway, my poor parents would have been horrified if they had to witness some of those double dealings, because my parents, that was their home. Their home was the other condo. And then that was the home that my sibling said belonged to me 50% and to her 50%. So what she ended up doing, though, and you won't even believe this, is she took her 50%, so let's just say the condo was $1 million. I think it was a little more than that, but we'll just round down. So if the condo was $1 million, she took her 500,000, okay? And then she took my 500,000 and she gave it to my ex. Yeah, really. And then, even though she said I owned it, so I'm not sure exactly how that worked, because did she forge my signature? Did she steal my identity? How do you sell a condo that belongs to someone else, right? Without my knowledge, without my permission. Yeah, I don't know how that transfer happened. But what was I going to say? So that's what happened with that condo. And then my sibling had that condo, my parents' condo, in as the subject of a sheriff's sale. And for any of you, I had never really known about a sheriff's sale or what that was, but apparently it's like an auction or something. And you go in there and you can just say, I'll give you $100 for everything. And so I think it was because she stopped paying the maintenance fees, perhaps. And so I don't really know what the legal strategy was. But anyway, so my ex then bought my parents' condo. And so not only did he get like my 500,000 from it, but then he got to buy the condo for, who knows, $1 maybe. I've tried to get the number, but no one will tell me because it's so ridiculously low. And so he actually could have made $1.5 million in this transaction, owning my parents' condo, when in effect he was entitled to zero. He wasn't entitled to anything. And regardless of his strategy of suing me and suing me and suing me, my father had a special clause in his trust, and it's called the spendthrift clause. And the spendthrift clause is very clear, and it says that none of, whether be it any lawsuit or any debt or whatever, none of my inheritance can be used to satisfy anything like that, to satisfy a judgment, to satisfy a debt, to satisfy anything. So you cannot go after my inheritance. Meanwhile, by this time, without an attorney, because I couldn't get one, moving vans the size of houses, came down to Clearwater, and they started, just like men would just come in my home and just start taking things, and furniture and clothes and shoes and books and, basically whatever he wanted, he came in and took, and I couldn't stop him. And so a grand piano, I mean, just beautiful antiques, along with, things, little dishes that were meaningless, but just kind of to just take everything. And he left me with very little. But, you know, going back to my son, because my son actually would come and visit me in Florida, and yet I didn't have any idea that he was actually working with his dad. And so when he would come down to Florida and stuff, and he'd say, "Mom, I'm gonna work on your computer a little bit." I said, "Oh, that's so great." And then he'd say, "You know what? I tied your computer into my computer in London." And I was like, "Well, are you sure? Why would you do that?" And he'd say, "Well, because if you have any trouble, then I'll be able to get on it right away and fix it for you." And so I was like, "Oh, thank you. That's wonderful." I had no idea that he was doing that so that his father could continue suing me and know all my business and know what I was doing and know what I had and what I didn't have. And I mean, everything was like a joke. But when I think about that and I think about like the lioness, because many of us moms, take on that persona of the lioness, and we have our little cubbies that we love more than anything. And we snuggle with them and we love them and we hug them and we, protect them and we comfort them and we want to make sure that they have their every need met, right? And so when I think of that, and then I think of what if one of these little cubbies actually turned on the lioness, turned on the mother, and decided to sacrifice her. And I thought, oh, that's like against nature. That's like not even natural. That's just wrong. And I know spiritually there is no right and wrong, but you see what I'm saying? I mean, it's such a betrayal. It's a betrayal to the hilt, truly. But anyway, I just don't know where that one came from. But I wondered what kind of lessons were awaiting, my children who, for personal gain, decided to sell out their mother. Um, I don't know. And I say that from a very humble perspective because I did see my mother die and I saw my father die. Um, and well, actually, I didn't see my mother die because they wouldn't let me stay after a certain time of visiting hours. And by the next morning, she had died. But I had been there witnessing her 17 days of starvation. So, in essence, um, I did witness her death to some degree because she was nothing like the person that started 17 days prior. But anyway, um, what can I tell you? I think my son and my sibling and my ex had a plan on how they were going to just strip me of everything. And with the help of their attorneys, and did have several, they were able to carry it out. And so, what did I want to tell you about? Oh, you might want to be asking me about the defamation judgment. And that was, I told you that I had written a letter documenting my life story and what my ex-husband had told me he was going to do to me if I should leave. And so I was terribly afraid. And I did go to the authorities, as I mentioned to you. And so he sued me for an order of protection, and then he sued me in civil court for defamation, and he said what I wrote wasn't true. Well, he produced a letter in evidence that was not the letter that I wrote. And so I'm not sure how he was able to get away with that because that really isn't legal. But he did produce a letter, and so I was tried on the basis of that letter and was received a judgment of $9.7 million against me, which at the time was the largest defamation judgment between private individuals in the history of the country. Now, I assume that Johnny Depp will have a larger one, or whoever is going to lose that case. And 9.7 million in 2006, with the statutory interest of 10% compounded annually or daily, whatever, is probably like 50 million or so right now. And so we're close. 40 million, 50 million. I don't know. I'd have to have my calculator. But it's a lot of money. And what my attorneys figured out is they said, by the time you're 80 years old, you will owe your ex-husband $500 million. They said, that's pretty ludicrous, isn't it? Because that's just so crazy. And they could have destroyed me by taking, at that point, they kept taking all my things, and it was just like this open door of all of my belongings just going out the window. No, well, actually going out the door in the elevator and outside into the moving vans. But what was I going to say about that one? But yeah, they just got it all. But 9.7 million. Yeah, was probably a lot more than that now. Here we are in 2022. But we don't have to really be geniuses to know that was enough to clean me out. And I know what I was going to say, is that he could have cleaned me out with, 50,000, or because I didn't have 50,000 cash to give him, or $50 or $500 or $5,000. Instead, he had to do something so ridiculous, like 9.7 million, which was the amount of part of my inheritance, actually. And then again, with compounded interest, it's far more than that right now. But one of the things he had told me was that he had taken out a contract on me. And so I guess he didn't really want that out into the public. And so he sued me and said I lied, But in fact, everything I wrote in that letter was true. And the things that he told me he was doing and he had done and he was going to do to me. And so I was terrified. So so he switched the letters, and I got this huge judgment. And of course, you know what? It made national news, and it was on the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times, and my picture was right there. And the headline of the newspaper of the front page was, "She must pay." And it was almost like, I told you, if you leave me, you will pay. And so there it was. That was the headline right there. And the thing is that the verdict was read on October 6th. Well, my oldest son's birthday is October 7th. And so guess when that newspaper came out with that ridiculous headline? On my son's birthday. And so was that a message to him saying, you know what, you will pay too if you continue to support your mother? And so I don't know, because there are so many kind of nuances and so many kind of hidden meanings to things. But I do, that's one of the reasons why I look at this from a spiritual perspective, because I don't know what my son was thinking. And I don't know just how frightened he was, because he had been frightened in the past. And so I can't really fault him, because I don't know. I'm not him. I don't know what terror he was living through. I do know the terror I was living through. And despite my age and however an adult I was really terrified. And I know that many abused men and women, are terrified. Thank God, as I've said in other videos, that there are so many wonderful videos now exposing the narcissists, because so many of us have been married to narcissists. And I know when I was first married, I used to pull out the yellow pages. I guess they don't even have those anymore, but I pulled them out, and I used to circle names of psychiatrists for my ex. And I'd say, you know what, you are deeply disturbed and you need to call and set up an appointment. And sometimes he'd set up an appointment and then he wouldn't go, or if he'd go and then they would say, well, um, you might be responsible for some of this, and then he would fire them. So anyway, that's yeah, there's a lot of psychopathology walking around on 2 feet on planet Earth, but that is part of the evolution of the collective consciousness. We are, and of human beings, we are becoming more aware and more awakened, and seeing things from a higher perspective. Um, so anyway, let's see, what can I tell you? I told you about the moving vans and all the things that all the assets that were just being stripped, and and my father really wanted to protect my assets. And so one of the things that some of the attorneys said that my father had seen is for me to turn over all my assets to my father, and then in his trust, then my assets would then revert directly to me. And so I basically then didn't have anything in my name. And so therefore, I was to file bankruptcy. And that was how, because you might say, well, how'd she go through a bankruptcy? And that was based on the advice of attorneys. So not only did I have that 4 or 5 year divorce, and then all the post-divorce pleadings and trials and everything like that, but then there was the order of protection for the letter I wrote, and then there was the defamation trial, then there was the bankruptcy trial, and then there was the estate trial, and so anyway, it was just like I that's why um, that's why I have to say that it just couldn't be a coincidence that I had to experience so many legal losses and to see so much of what I saw and what I felt, and the compassion I have for um, men and women going through divorce or going through any type of litigation, and how I absolutely know that there's a better way of doing it. And in fact, in 2015 or 16, I awakened in the middle of the night and I had this idea of how we could reform the legal system. And so I think I have those videos on YouTube, perhaps. And one was "My Dear Mr. President." That's how I wrote those letters, as if I was talking to the president. And I don't even remember who was president at that time. I think it was Obama. But I was saying that it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be so acrimonious, and it doesn't have to be so painful. We can do it so that we see the other person as ourselves, and that we want our children to come out of this whole and healthy, not fractured with carnage lining the streets. We really want a good solution to it, and it can be done. Yes. And so anyway, the back to the bankruptcy, the judge did not erase the verdict. Um, and she said she did not believe that I was afraid based on my son's testimony as the star witness, because he said, oh, no, she wasn't afraid at all. She was just making it up. So I was like horrified. Again, we talked about this, and we don't know why he actually came up with that story, but that's really between him and his God, right? Because we know that lies only go so far, and that it's all about telling the truth, and that the darkness that we see in the world is the result of people, what is it, skimping corners and thinking they can get away with a white lie, or thinking that they can have an affair and their significant other won't find out, or thinking that they can cheat on their taxes, and the IRS won't catch it, or what is it, like even running a toll and not paying for the toll, or leaving a restaurant without tipping the waitress, or paying for your bill, or I don't know, what else do people do? Shoplift maybe, or I don't know, but doing things that they think, because they don't see the cameras there filming them, they think they can get away with it. And so many people um, do stretch and don't act in integrity. And so let's see. I told you about I just have to refer to my notes here because there's just so much to talk about. Um, so, oh, yeah. So, well, this is just kind of ridiculous, but you know, I I wrote that it's a good thing that my parents weren't alive to see the ridiculous way in which the bankruptcy was was handled, and then the division of their estate, and that both of my parents met untimely deaths, which I talked about in detail in numbers 1 through 3, I think. But I ended up totally broke. They took everything, uh, and oh gosh, it's unbelievable. I actually yeah, I ran out of money. I had a small IRA that I was using to pay for myself and my significant other when we were in Brazil at that spiritual mission, and then we came back, and I had, I don't know, $10,000 or $15,000 left, and so I bought a car, and because we needed one, and then we had rent, and so and neither one of us, it was like every job we tried to apply for was sabotaged. So we couldn't get a job, and we had no money coming in, and so I spent everything on our rent and our food before I gave him the keys to the car that I had bought, and I said, just go, because there's something just too bizarre about my life. And we were both kind of depressed. He was more depressed than I was, because I was kind of just thinking, well, this happened for a reason, and I'm going to get through this. So I almost became more motivated in order to try to understand what was going on, because everything was just too bizarro. It was like, oh my gosh. But anyway, so after I ran out of money, I went to 3 different homeless shelters, and I started helping the homeless people as much as they were helping me. And so I made a video on them, trying to raise exposure on that, saying, look, I might be the wealthiest homeless person out there, but what good is that? Because I'm still totally broke and hungry. And so and then after that, I ended up living with different families. And that was a wonderful learning experience, because I lived with one family that had 15 dogs. I lived, and some let's see, some exchange students. I lived with a Cambodian family, which I had never lived with anyone Asian. And I lived with 2 high school teachers. I lived with a retired teacher. And I lived with a Unity, what do you call it, pastor, and her children. And so I lived with a videographer who actually helped me make videos. And so those are the videos that you'll see on my website, mariahaiti.com. And so I spent a year and a half there, and we were making videos. And I think he took like 10,000 pictures of me, and we have like over 100 videos, which was in my spiritual take of life on planet Earth. And I think I had bought, I don't know how many different wigs and costumes and tutus and stuff like that. And I just made it. It was just fun. I thought it was a riot. But anyway, getting back to this now, I understand that the things in my home that my son had sold, my son had ended up selling my condo. And I don't know what happened to all of those things, but I did hear that my sibling actually has stuffed her home, and she also has another condo, I guess, in St. Petersburg. And so she has stuffed her homes with my possessions. And so, that's kind of hard to get over, to think that, gosh, and she's never invited me over, and even before. So I think that there was, yeah, I think my things were somehow finding their way to her homes. And so that's another form of betrayal that we have to get over, right? And so there was a reason for it, because I kept running into the same kind of people that were trying to thieve and to destroy. And so I can't blame other people. I have to understand, I have to look at myself and say, what is the lesson? Because obviously I didn't get it the first time or the second time or the third time. And so I had to be strong, and I had to um, uh, see things not as a victim, but in fact as someone who was here to expand my soul in a way where I would experience so very much that life had to offer me here. And so I did hear, though, that in terms of my parents' condo, and I know I'm digressing from one condo to the other, because the one condo was my parents' condo that my ex ended up buying in the sheriff's sale, that my sibling said that actually I lived there with my dad. And that's totally, totally not true. But I did hear that, in fact, perhaps she didn't have to pay taxes on it, um, if in fact I was his caregiver. And I had heard something like that there was that allegation that I was his caregiver, which certainly isn't true. But um, it also softened uh, her telling anyone that I was thrown out on the street. It was like, oh, well, she was dad's caregiver, and he died. And so anyway, but so that was that, tax issue that it just kind of came to me because someone mentioned that, and I thought, oh, I wonder if that had anything to do with it. But anyway, I also in my parents' condo, because my own condo was pretty well stuffed at one point when I had all my things, and so in my parents' condo, there was an extra bedroom and closets, and so my dad said, "Oh, bring all your stuff here. You can use these closets and use this extra bedroom and put your stuff here because it's empty. There's no one here." And so I did. I had a lot of things there. So when she sold it, and she took her half, she gave my half to the ex, and then he bought the condo. One morning, I looked outside my kitchen window, and I saw her directing men who were taking my belongings that were in that condo, and they were piling them one on top of another. And then it was like a murder scene, because then they taped it off with, that big yellow and black tape. And so they taped that off, and then there was a security guard out there with a gun. And I thought, I am not going to go there, and I'm not going to say, "Oh, that's my picture," or that's my coat," or yeah, that's my suitcase, or that's my silver bowl. No, you know what? They could have it. And so yeah, it did remind me of like a crime scene. But let's see, what else can I tell you? I hope this is making sense to you, and I so appreciate our looking at things like this, where we don't have to cry, we don't have to grieve, we don't even have to mourn, because everything happens in perfect order. And the perfection of the universe is stunning. And we don't see it while we're going through it. We see it afterwards. And so when I tell you that I lost everything, and I don't even have, 20 extra dollars to spare, or, I had been, some of the finest chefs in the world had prepared meals for me when I was part of, high society in Chicago. But and I was then walking the ghetto, and I had half a loaf of bread, and I was really hungry. I was like, oh my gosh, this is, well, yeah, it's like a movie. And so when the people betrayed me, I really thought, oh my God, this is so horrible. There's another one. But you know what? It just kind of, the way it happened, it happened the way it was supposed to happen, I guess. I'm still having a lot of difficulty knowing that my parents were sacrificed. That's the worst part of all, actually. My parents and my children were sacrificed. And um, I'm not sure. I believe that on the other side, they agreed with their creator, because we all agree with our creator in terms of when we come and when we go, because no one else has that right to take a life. It's always by agreement, um, on a very subconscious level. That's my personal opinion. Um, and so, and I'll tell you another thing that I think about sometimes, and I think, oh my gosh, when it comes to my children, because I protected my children in every way I could, and didn't want them to know about a lot of the things that I had been going through. And so they knew and saw enough on their own to know that I wasn't um, I wasn't happy and I wasn't safe where I was. But at the same time, it wasn't for me to disparage their father to them. And so I tried to just keep secrets, and I'm a pretty good secret keeper, if I know that it's in the best interest of my children. And so anyway, when we talk about the sabotage we've experienced, and the arrogance and the extravagance and the entitlement, yeah, and the blackmail and the coercion and the threats, and the intimidation, even. Those are all tools used by the dark to drag souls down into the lower vibratory energies. And so you might ask, what's the solution? So I thought about that, because I don't know much about the penal system, actually. But I thought, now, how could I impress upon my son and my other children, and even my sister, how could I impress upon them how I felt, and the gravity of the situation, and why they did what they did, and how that affected me, and truly how it affects them, because they have to live with the karma that they created. And so I I thought, well, the only way I could rationalize that was that perhaps if one experiences what one has created for another, then that really is the best way to own that experience. So perhaps if my sibling or my son stole my things, stole my home, stole my things, stole all my resources, my assets, my accounts, and everything. Perhaps, they need to return that, right? And then they need to lose some of what they have, so that they can feel the loss, so that they can exercise some compassion and hold some compassion for others. Because, quite honestly, I think that that is a key to my own path, because living in my mansion, I never knew about a homeless person. I just didn't. They weren't in my neighborhood. I didn't see them. I didn't talk to them. I was probably very afraid of them. And because, the story is, oh yeah, well, they're either mentally ill, or they're alcoholics, or druggies. And my experience there was that that's not the case. I mean, of course, there are some, and I'll tell you, if you're in that situation long enough, even if you started off okay, you do, um, it becomes very desperate, and you do feel despair, justifiably so. And so I thought, maybe my children should work in a homeless, give back in a homeless shelter, or they should give some of their things away, and then they should lose some of their favorite things, as they have taken from others. And my sibling as well. And of course, my ex, is long gone. But But really, I think that's the only way to really connect because, oh, I know what I was saying is that, when I was in the homeless shelters, that was a way that I could really have compassion and hold compassion for my brothers and sisters who were struggling like that. And, of course, I was struggling too, but because, um, because of my background and because of all of my experiences, and I always knew that I was going to come out of it. I didn't know when, I certainly didn't know how, but I knew that it was a temporary situation and that I was being gifted, which sounds bizarre in and of itself. But I just had that knowing. And maybe it's because I do feel so deeply connected with my creator that I kind of detached from the whole situation. And I was trying to look at it, from a psychological perspective, from a philosophical perspective, as well as from a spiritual perspective. So, um, so anyway, that was that. And I think that if you give back to society, whether you are guilty of of stealing, of taking something that isn't yours, of maliciously gossiping about someone, of just doing things that aren't in integrity. I think that the only way that you can really feel the pain that you've caused is when you experience that yourself. And so, I'm not sure how to implement this. This is beyond my scope, but I am just saying from a theoretical perspective. Um, and also, because we say, oh, well, karma's going to come. Karma knows your address. It never loses an address. And I do believe that. Of course, um, many times people just don't understand what that karma is and when it has arrived. And so, there can be that job loss, that you have, or that relationship loss, or perhaps even the death of a pet, or the diabetes that you were just diagnosed with. Well, just perhaps, and I'm not saying that this is the case, but it did cause me to think, just perhaps, um, you're seducing someone else's husband. That's the payback. You've just experienced that payback. Or you're lying and gossiping about someone, or you're borrowing something from someone. Maybe they loaned you money and you haven't paid it back and have no intention of doing so. And so, because that energy, that we send out with every action does return to its originator. And so, I that's what I was wondering about. Well, the criminals in my family, how could they possibly, um, how could they possibly feel the emotions that I experienced? And some people surely can't. Narcissists are incapable of having empathy. So, that's a done deal then, right? We can't go any further there. But for those individuals who um, who aren't totally over the line in narcissistic personality disorder, or they're not sociopaths or psychopaths or bipolar or whatever, so or borderline personalities. Um, you know, when we think of someone other than ourselves, then we can hold space for them. So if we exercise caring rather than discarding people, actually, whether we're giving rather than hoarding, helping rather than harming. I think that's key too. Feeding rather than overeating, showing compassion rather than hating, being patient rather than being reckless, right? Being gentle rather than being violent, and telling the truth rather than lying, and using kind words rather than malicious gossip. So it's when we can give back and pay back, in a good way, and really feel remorse for what we've done, and get in touch with our conscience, because I think that a lot of people do things when they are totally divorced from their conscience, and that's a dangerous place to be. And so I think that uh, part of the lesson here for every one of us is when we see the true colors of people that have kept their dark selves hidden, we become shockingly aware of that level of depravity on the planet, and yet it's there, and that's probably why we are on this little planet at this point in the stage of evolution of humanity, as well as the planet itself, because it's undergoing its own evolution. And the pandemic, was a pause and a purging of sorts. And so the darkness, has been bubbling up, and so it's time that we kind of went beyond what we know, and to make the world a better place. And so we have a responsibility to ourselves, which is to pay attention to the red flags that people show us, that people hold up, actually. And so when they do something really crazy, they hold up the red flag, and we're supposed to pay attention, and we're supposed to say, oh, okay, well, he's actually telling me I really need to leave this relationship because it's not very good for me. But a lot of times we just say, oh, we excuse people. We say, oh, he didn't really mean that, or whatever. And so we do. We are loving creatures. I mean, we are love. And so we want to see the best in everyone. And so I think on that note, I'm going to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with me and allowing me to share uh, the good side of my story. How about that? And there's a good side to your story. And I pray that you find that. And maybe together we can work together so that you will see that. Because that's the wonderful, that's the gift. That's the that's the diamond in the rough. That's the needle in the haystack. That's 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 the key to Tut's tomb. That's the get out of jail free card. That's the gold. And I think I said this in another video. It's the gold bullion, it's the gold coin, it's the golden treasure. And so it's the gift that is bestowed upon us by our Creator. And so may you find that. And I look forward to seeing you in our next video, number 6. And so with that note, I bid you adieu, and I love you.